Episode 1 of Built for More, man. It's finally here. I'm Denny Thompson. That is Pastor Joby Martin, who happens
What's
to be
up?
my pastor. Yeah, man, we've been planning this for a while. Well, hold on.
You've been planning this for a while. I've just been saying, sure.
Yeah, yeah, we'll get into more of that in a little bit, kind of how this thing came about in my head, and then, how huge your patience with me has been and why there's been a need for patience. So I'll get to that in a second. But the thought of this podcast is really like most of the time there's going to be a guest here. And it's my thought on it, Joby, and I want to hear your thought on this is just I want to get to know people, man. I want to get to know sports figures. I want to get to know business people. I want to get to know pastors, leaders, successful people, because I feel like for me anyway, in my journey, not just as a Christian guy, but just as a man, it took me a long time to realize that there's wisdom in people. And it took me a long time to realize that, man, if you just sit back and listen to people who are doing things well,
Right.
there's some commonalities there that I don't know that a lot of people get to hear. I've been very blessed to be around some amazing people that have kind of helped me through my journey. So that's really kind of the goal of the podcast is I kind of wrote this down. Let me see if I can find this. It's like athletes, coaches, business leaders, podcasters. So it's like sports, business, education, entertainment, and gospel kind of thing, right?
Yeah. Well, what I like about this, man, what I think is gonna be very interesting, it's most podcasts are just experts talking to experts.
Yeah.
Like it's the most famous pastors talking to the most famous pastors, it's the smartest theologians or the political pundits talking to each other. And especially in your world, we were talking about this before we hit record. I mean, like if you turn on any sports radio or sports television show, it's just the experts talking to the experts.
Yeah.
I've got about a million questions for the guests that we have coming on that are the experts, right? They're the best in their field. They're the best quarterbacks, the best coaches, or even you. The average fan sitting on the couch doesn't know that it's guys like you that are the glue behind the scenes of all the sports that we see. I mean, I'm watching the national championship last year, maybe, and Herb Street's just throwing your name all over the place. Okay, so here's the thing,
Yeah.
man. If I didn't know you and we didn't go to church together, I'd have no idea who he's talking about. And so I've got all kind of intrigue about like how the heck are you the guy that's the quarterback whisperer that has 10 or 15 of the top quarterbacks in the world and you've trained them? I mean, I've got so many questions, so many
Yeah.
questions.
That's going to be the interesting thing to your point. Cause my world you're interested in, I'm really interested in your world. So
Sure.
it's like, that's going to be like, I think we're going to be kind of, hey, Joby, calm down on the sports and let's talk some, you know what I mean? Like, there's
Well,
going to be a little bit of that.
the other thing that's happened to me in the past few years is the amount of top tier athletes that are like preacher fans. I mean, they've got their pick of, a half a dozen guys that they listen to. And, because of all the guys that you train that come through Jacksonville, and then, with the Jaguars being here, there's a couple of guys that reach out like I would reach out as a fan to,
Mm.
whatever my favorite team is, which is there's a few of those that are obvious. Anybody that's ever listened to me preach. So I got a bunch of Bulldog questions, man, going forward.
Actually, if you're cool, let's start there. Because
Yeah, let's go.
obviously you're the pastor of 1122. For those that don't know, I train quarterbacks, and then as we get through this, man, like we'll learn plenty about each other.
Yeah.
And I think for me right now, like the questions I have for you are a little bit in your sports arena. Like, when
Okay.
did this? Is it fair to call it an obsession with the Georgia Bulldogs?
Yeah, it's terrible. I mean, I mean, the word fan is just short for fanatic, and
Mhm.
I am truly a fanatic when it comes to Georgia football.
Like 1 to 10, 10 being
10.
out.
Like,
Really,
oh my
really.
gosh.
Do you
Like,
bark?
oh my Lord, yes. Yes, yes, yes. And so I love everything about it. In fact, and I talk so much junk. And a part of the reason, okay, so I moved here in 2003 to Jacksonville. I moved here from Athens. So, it's kind of easy. Like when you're in the hometown, the wins and losses aren't nearly as big a deal because everybody hurts with you or celebrates with you.
Yep,
But
yep.
dude, when you move, especially in '03, when you move from the holy land of Athens, Georgia, to especially in '03, what was a hardcore Gator country, which, they're kind of quiet right now. And then Tebow comes along. Good gosh. And he's a hometown guy. And he loves the Lord. And everybody's telling me about
Mm.
how much I need to know him. I couldn't stand him in college, man. I mean, and then now he goes to our church. He's a member of our church, and we do all kind of stuff together. And it turns out he actually is who he purports to be. Like, he loves the Lord. He loves his wife. He's the best guy I've ever met in my life. Okay. Well, I don't need that scoring touchdowns against us. All right. And so it's almost like it made my fandom of Georgia even worse. It drove me way into the deep end because I had to put up with the Gators for so long. And I get a home game every year. So I mean, I love it. Denny, when I can't tell you how it doesn't make any sense. My wife makes so much fun of me about it. But on Saturday, if we aren't winning, I'm thinking about how am I even going to preach tomorrow and face all these
Wow.
people.
Wow.
I mean, I get into it way too much. Now, I kind of have I have about the 12-hour rule.
Okay.
So when we lose, I give myself 12 hours to like bemoan it and feel bad about it. And a couple of pastors on our church, we got a little group text. And if that thing ever goes public, we'll probably all get fired. Okay. Based on the things that we say.
We've all got those.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. I mean, on the one hand, it's dumb because again, I get it. I get it logically. It's just a bunch of kids playing sports, and I actually care more about the Bulldogs than some of the actual Bulldogs because they'll just leave and go somewhere else. So I live and die over it. But I get it. If you keep it in context, I think it's fine because then when we did win back-to-back national championships, I
Yeah.
get to celebrate at a level that's way beyond just, hey man, it's just a bunch of kids and it doesn't matter. So,
Well, it's interesting because I moved here. I'm originally from Louisiana. Was
okay.
in Arkansas until I came to until I went to high school. So ninth grade, I moved to Jacksonville. For
Okay.
whatever reason, when I got here, I became a Gator fan. I don't
Sure.
remember why, but I was just a Gator fan. My wife, who was a high school sweetheart of mine, was my not a high school, the high school sweetheart. Made it sound like
Yeah.
I've got a bunch of them. Both of her parents went to Georgia, and she has been a lifelong Bulldog fan.
I knew I loved her.
Yeah, so we went to the first Natty in Indianapolis, and then at the time I had a client, Carson Beck, who was there but not playing.
Right.
And so the last couple of years, I've become obviously a huge Georgia fan
Right. Yep.
because of Carson. And I got to tell you, man, like my fandom of teams in general has kind of gone out the window the last, I don't know, 8 years. I just don't care. I'm just pulling for my guys.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Well,
bro,
it's
Athens,
different.
top three, top five, maybe the number one college city in the country. It is just
It's incredible.
love the Georgia fans. Had a great time in my time there. What a roller coaster, by the way. And by the way, Carson, I talked to him this week. He's going to come on this here in a couple of weeks.
Good.
So
His mom was my kid's first grade teacher.
yeah, yeah,
So I
yeah,
knew Miss
Jacksonville boy.
Beck. I still just know her as Miss Beck.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So we've
So
known
my
him
my
for a long
fan,
time.
well, my point is my fandom's changed, but I still love
Yeah.
the sport. And you said something that it's crazy. These are 19-year-old guys, in
Right.
some case, and we're gathering 105,000 people around. And like you said, man, like our worlds are turned upside down when these 18 and 19-year-old guys don't perform, but it makes my job fun. I love the pressure of that. At my age, man, it's there's nothing I can do that gets you that adrenaline rush, like seeing these guys succeed. It's I'm blessed, bro. I'm blessed with this. I don't know why I was chosen to do this. I didn't really even play. I wasn't any good. But man, here I am. It's fun.
Yeah. That my question that I've always wondered because you played quarterback what in college, right?
No, no, no. I wasn't nowhere.
Not
I
even.
played in high school. No, I handed off in high school a ton. That's all I did.
So
Seriously.
how? All right. So then, how did that go? How do you go from? I mean, it's not like you're 6'4" with a 7-foot wingspan either. You know what I
Right,
mean? Like,
right, right.
how in the world? When did you figure this out? When did you figure out like, wow, I've really got a gift, and the greatest quarterbacks are going to seek me out to help them be even better?
That's such a good question.
I mean, your list of guys that come to you, it's remarkable.
Mhm. Yeah,
Um,
it's well, first off, and I'm not saying this just to be humble, like the team that I've got is ridiculous. Like the other trainers, I kind of get put into the spotlight because I'm local and I do radio and all that stuff, but I'm the least talented guy in our roster, and that's not being humble. That's a fact. That's an absolute fact.
well, I
But to
feel the
answer
same
the
way on our staff at church. I feel like if I didn't plant the church, I couldn't even get a job here now. So I'm glad I started it, so I get to work here.
no, same. I
Yeah,
feel like I have to bring value in other ways because these guys are just so intelligent, and such biomechanical experts. But to answer your question, I've asked that a lot, and I kind of knew you were going to ask me that. And the real answer is I have no idea, man. There was a point in my life where I was not doing this and saw
hmm,
no way to doing this, and really failing at everything else that I was doing. And it took literally me being broke, having two kids, having to live with my parents, my wife's parents, and just I'm that stubborn that it took breaking me down to my core at that level, um, to force me to do what God called me to do.
well, that'll
Um,
preach.
yeah, I mean that's just the truth. And now you look at this, and I've had a little bit of like a reflection period on this recently because my business has changed so much. I've gotten more into the management side of things and things like that. But the truth of the matter is when you look at this, to your point, I don't have the resume to do this, and so I cannot have an ego on this because this isn't me, right?
Yeah.
It's just not me. I actually last night read a quote from you. Let me see. I printed it out here. Let me find this, and this was like from 2017. You were, let's see, Outreach Magazine. And you had a quote in there that said, "The fact I get to be the pastor of this thing is one of God's greatest graces upon me. I totally don't deserve it. I'm not qualified for it. I'm ill equipped. And there are a lot of guys with a whole bunch more talent than me. And yet, for whatever reason, he chose to put me in this seat." That's the answer. I'm gonna
Yeah.
steal your bars on this. And that's the honest answer right there.
I do I do think there's one other reason that you're good at what you do, because we've known each other. I mean, a decade
Yep.
plus, something like that.
Hmm.
Um, and you've got incredible influence over two arenas that every guy like me that played high school football would give their left arm to be a part of: the NFL and NCAA college football.
Yeah.
And yet, in almost all of our conversations, what I sense from you is that you actually care about people. Like, never once have you are you like, guess who I know? It's never that. Every time I'm on the phone with you, you're you're leveraging, whether it's how to throw a ball or how to, seal a deal on a contract for the benefit of that person. I mean, and
Hmm.
we could name the individuals. They're all very famous, it's like
Let's not. Let's
this
not.
no, we won't, but it's the
Yeah.
studliest, most athletic human beings that have ever been created by God on the planet. I mean, these guys are unbelievable. And yet, um, all you ever talk about is, even the guests we're gonna have on, all you just talk about them. You could tell that your heart is for these people. And I'm telling you, man, God rewards that,
Yeah.
because
The,
God is for people. And
man,
so
you.
when we are for his people, then God really rewards that. And so, and I can tell you one of the things, I mean, I'm so blessed to get to be able to do what I do. People ask me all the time, and I think this will apply to you too, Denny. Often people ask me, like, how do you keep your head from getting so big because of all the success? And first of all, I've never thought about it that way. And the best thing I can come up with this is, when a mosquito grabs onto a freight train, the mosquito does not feel bigger.
Mm,
And so
yeah.
I said yes to
That's
the
so
Lord to
good.
teach the Bible when I was 19. Little did I know it would be, all the things that I get to do now. It doesn't make me feel bigger. It makes me feel way smaller. And I'm just trying to hang on and be obedient to what he's called me to do.
That's such an interesting observation too, and I'm glad you said that because I was going to ask you, like, at one point, I'm always curious because it took me so late in life to figure out what the heck I was and what I was supposed to be doing, and I fought against it and fought against it because I kind of grew up thinking, well, my dad did this or my grandfather did that, which means I need to do this, and both of us come from like we'll call it like a country background, right?
Yeah.
Um, and it's like you just grow up in those cities and you see what's happening in those cities, and you're like, man, if I can just make X amount of money and afford a six pack on Fridays, like man, that's the life. Let's go.
Yeah.
So it took me till I was late 30s, Joby, to figure out there was more than that. It didn't take you that long. And what my real question for you on that is, like, how did you know that this was your calling at a young age? Like, what was it that was there a moment where you were just like, "Oh crap, this is what I was called to do"? Because bro, I love you to death and you have been a huge influence in my life, but I do not envy your job.
Yeah. When I tell people all the time when they think they want to go into ministry, I'm like, listen, man, if you can do anything else, you should go do that and just be a great church member.
Mhm.
But if God calls you, man, I don't, man, you're going to be a miserable human being if you don't do what He's told you to do. So I didn't really, I was voluntold to do this by a football coach of all people. Coach Bully was a football coach in South Carolina where I grew up. And I got saved as a high school kid. My home life was a train wreck, and I found myself at this camp cutting grass for him,
Mhm.
and, that's where I got saved. First time I ever I mean, I grew up in the South, so I would have considered myself a Christian, but I believed in Jesus like I believe in the Second Amendment, SEC football, and, we still need to have a fullback. You know what I mean? Like, that kind of thing, like Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny. And then I'm at this camp. They recreate the crucifixion of Christ, and I get saved. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's like it actually happened, and it actually happened for me when Jesus died on the cross and said it is finished. That counted for me, so I get saved. So, and I don't do anything a little bit. So I go home like just on fire. I go from like the biggest party kid, fighting every weekend and getting drunk to telling everybody about Jesus. Well, Coach Lee brings me back to that same camp, and he would just force me into places of leadership. Like he would just be like, "Hey, you're preaching tonight." I was like, "What?" Or "You're leading this Bible study," or that's what he would just do constantly. And then when I was 19, I was a junior in college, and I was studying medicine. I just got accepted to med school. And honestly, the only reason I wanted to be a doctor is because I wanted to be rich and respected, and I knew I could do the school. That was it. And the Lord, I don't know how to explain it. I'm sitting in the back of a church service, and it was supposed to actually be for students. I was just there volunteering as one of the leaders, and had been volunteering in that church while I was in college. And I just felt overwhelmed that when the pastor was saying, "Some of you right now are called to go into full time vocational ministry," and I thought, "Well, crap, that's me." And so I went and talked to my pastor and said, "I think that's me. I think I'm supposed to go into ministry." And he was so great, man. And he's like, "Well, why don't you just come kick the tires and try it out? We'll do an internship. Give me 5 or 6 hours a week because all you've ever seen is the fun stuff, and come see how the sausage is made." And he said, "God will always confirm what He calls." And so I feel like I've just taken one little tiny step at a time. Like, then I went into student ministry. I was going to be a youth pastor forever because that's where the action is. Most people get saved before 18. Old people are hard to work with. Kids don't know what's happening. I thought teenagers is right where it's at. And I did that forever. Thought I'd do it forever. And then my pastor here in Jacksonville put me in charge of a service that we were hosting. And then the service outgrew the whole church. And then he came to me and said, "You should plant a church, and I've got your back. We'll support you, and you can live here until you get it all together, and then you can launch." And so I've never aspired to be in the position I'm in. I just, when I was 19, said yes to the Lord to teach the Bible. I thought I'd teach it to like 12 teenagers at a time.
Mm.
I didn't know that it'd be what it is today. But I've never tried to do that. It's just been like one little step at a time. Like even this podcast, man. Um, when you called and said, "Hey, I got an idea," and your ideas are the biggest ideas I've ever heard of in my life, and I'm like, "Okay, that's fine." And so I prayed about it and felt like, "Yeah, sure, I'll do this." And if the Lord wants to do something big, praise God. And if it's just me and you talking to each other every week, I like talking to you, no problem. And so if the Lord's in it, you can't stop it.
Mm.
And if He's not in it, you can't make it happen. And that's Gamaliel's advice, by the way, in Acts chapter 5. So that's kind of the way I live my life, and God just seemed to bless it. And I just try to be faithful with what's right in front of me. Be really faithful to the word of God. Be really faithful to taking care of the people that God has put in front of you, and then just trust Him with the rest. And now here we are.
Well, so let's go back to that coach for a second. It's
Okay.
Coach Bully, right?
Coach Bully, yeah, he's an absolute stud. he's kind of a legend in South Carolina high school coaching. He won a state championship the year before he died for Dillon Christian. So
Oh, wow.
he
Okay.
was, old school. Like they put him in prison today for the practices that he ran. You know what I mean?
But my question about him, and I've heard that story before, right? And I've
Right.
always had this question, and what I wonder is, was he the kind of guy who did that, who pushed that on everyone? Or do you think that there was a calling for Coach Lee to say, "Hey, this Joby Martin guy," and I've heard your stories, and I know you were probably like one of the least likely. This Joby Martin guy has something, and did you feel like he treated you a little differently than most in a good way and pushed you a little differently than most?
There was a group of us. There was, if you look over, there's probably 15 of us that kind of grew up under coach that are all in ministry now. And when he would see something in you, he didn't have like a discipleship strategy. His strategy was, boy, get in the truck.
Mm,
And he just did it. He didn't do anything alone. And he kind of assumed his faith upon you. That's what he would do. He would just be like, we do the right thing. That's what we do. I can remember one time I was about in the 8th grade and I was riding around with him in his Toyota. And we went to Walmart for some stuff, for some supplies for camp. And he got like an extra $5 bill in his change and realized it in the truck. Now, I would have been like, "Sweet, God has blessed me with $5."
right.
And we turned around, went back to Walmart. He went back in there to make sure he just did the right thing. It was that kind of stuff. The other thing he would do, because you know how it is in small town South, if you're a successful football coach, you get invited to speak at like the Lions Club and the Kiwanis and everything, right?
Mhm.
And so he would, especially as the season comes up, and there'd be these little breakfasts with all these men. And dude, he would just take one of us. He would just come by the house and get you and bring you to the meeting with him. And he'd stand up and be like, I know everybody wants to hear about Dillon football this year, but first, this boy's going to tell you about Jesus. Get up here and tell him, boy. And I'd get up there and just be like share my testimony at a football club meeting. And he just, that's what he did nonstop.
That's
And
wild.
but the thing is, though, here's the thing. But he was so highly regarded. He played college ball at University of South Carolina. He had a cup of coffee in the NFL, but didn't do it because he wanted to change the lives of young men, and he didn't think he could do it in the NFL. Especially, you got to think that's a long, like the '60s or whatever.
Mhm.
So he thought he could do it better as a high school football coach. So he had a chance at Green Bay, and then he just came home to South Carolina to influence young men.
That's, like, in a position I'm in, man, I've always wondered that because you come across so many different personalities, and, when you're not a professional preacher, those
Mhm.
conversations, man, like, they can be tough because in a lot of cases, not in your case, he was your coach, like, your high school coach, but in my case, like, it's you're mixing business and church. And that's,
Yeah.
that can be a risky proposition, but at the same time, like, man, I envy the level of certainty that your coach had in what he was doing and just how, there was no fear of consequences. There was just like, "Hey, Joby, I know what you're gonna be, and I'm gonna push you there." And in a way, I wish I had that. I mean, I come my dad obviously is awesome, and grandfather was a 60-year Baptist preacher.
Let's go.
My Angie's stepdad who raised her, who just passed away in December, was a longtime Baptist preacher, worked at the Florida Baptist Convention. So obviously I had religion all over me, right? Like Baptist church all over me. But man, it took well, this is how you and I originally met. Honestly, I don't even know if you know this, but it took me being at the depths, bro. Like, and let's not make any bones about it. I'm still a professional sinner. Like we'll barely get done with this. My biggest goal for this podcast is to not cuss, right? That's all I want to do. I got a terrible mouth, so I apologize ahead. But it took, my wife basically in 2015, not basically telling me, "Hey, this marriage is over."
Mhm.
And then the next day finding out that she had her first bout with cancer. And that cancer saved our marriage because we had to spend time together. She had to go through chemo, and then we were at saturated in 2015. and Josh Turner was preaching. And at the end of it, she grabbed me and she just pulled me down. And she walked down, and it was a bad time of her life, bald headed, straight from chemotherapy. And you popped up and you said to us, "Man, I didn't plan on getting out of my seat today, but I saw you walking over here, obviously going through chemo, so let's pray."
Yep.
And for her, I'm way more stubborn. For her, that was a defining moment, and she's been my inspiration, my hero ever since. Like, she's been my example of how you're supposed to live a joyful life through faith. Um, I'm still not there. And I told you this. This is the reason I want to do this podcast, man. I'm not gonna lie to you. Like, getting time with you is tough. This is my time with you. Like, I'm not there. I try, and there's days that I try, and then there's days that I don't try. But I am that's the reason too, Joby, that this thing took so long, because I'm scared to death, bro. I'm just gonna be honest. Like, scared to death of I am a underqualified to ever talk about anything like this. But I also know, what goes through this mind of mine, what goes through this head of mine, the struggles that I have, and just to even be able to talk about something like this just feels so weird to me, because I am not a preacher and I am not qualified in any way, shape, or form. So putting a spotlight on that's scary.
Well, but man, you're perfectly positioned. I mean, anybody that thinks they're done, bro. They're done. I mean, the life of the believer is that of daily repentance. That's what Martin Luther said when he wrote down the 95 Theses that launched into the Protestant Reformation. The number one thing that he said is the life of the believer is that of daily repentance. So the moment you think like I've got it and I've got it figured out and I don't need a savior, then you're screwed, bro. Jesus says it much more eloquently in the Sermon on the Mount. He says, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of God." So if you ever think, man, I've got this whole thing figured out, like I'm crushing it as a husband, I'm crushing it as a dad, I'm crushing it as a disciple, then you're screwed because you're full of pride. And that's the granddaddy of all sins. Because I feel the exact same with the way that everything you just said, I feel the same way. I feel like I can preach a heck of a sermon on what it means to be a husband, but to act that thing out is
Mm.
nearly impossible. And I mean, I know a bunch of Bible, but that's what I've been doing for a living for a long time. But I actually think, I think you can have more influence in the kingdom over an individual than I can, because part of the thing when you are a professional preacher, people just expect me to say what I say. Like the moment I sit down on an airplane next to somebody and they ask me what I do, and I'm like, well, I'm a pastor of a church, and then I start talking about Jesus. They were like, well, of course, that's what this guy sells. But when you say, well, I manage athletes and I coach quarterbacks, and then you start talking about faith, you
Yeah.
can have an influence on a whole group of people that I can't. In fact, I think like a part of my job is to equip you to be that kind of missionary in the arenas that you're in that I don't get invited into. Nobody invited me to the combine. I wish they would. I've got plenty of opinions on it, but
Well, I actually, all right, not to get off topic, along those lines, I do have a sports question for you.
all right, let's go.
I don't know if you ever listen to my radio show, but I have
Of
severe
course,
ADD, so I go all over the place.
no problem.
Um, I've heard some rumors about you back in the day and your weightlifting prowess and passion back in the day.
Sure.
All right, so what age were you at your peak physical, like, condition?
Uh, right before my son JP was born, so he's 19 and he's a freshman at FSU. That was probably the peak. I competed in bodybuilding for about 15 years or so.
Okay. So
And
at your peak, here's what I'm asking. You're going to like this
yes, sir.
question. Florida Georgia game.
Yeah.
Georgia puts you in at running back. You got
Okay.
20 carries. What's your stat line?
Probably about 6 yards, because after that first hit, I think I'm dead, man. These people are unbelievable.
I, I
I mean, let's say 2 years ago with that offensive line, I may not break a tackle, but I could go 4 yards in a cloud of dust, so maybe I could get 80 yards.
Okay, okay, 20 carries, 80 yards is solid.
Well, I mean, I think nobody touched our running backs until the second level there for a couple of years, so
I'm 20 carries, 21 yards, 4 fumbles.
yeah, that's the other thing. I've got fumbles. Hey, here's a question. How come a guy, uh, like, how is the NFL just a completely different game in that an average running back at Georgia turns out to be one of the best running backs in the NFL? You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's,
And the other way,
yeah.
like the RB1 just kinda doesn't do it. Does it just have to do with scheme and system, or is it, they're catching more stuff out of the backfield than they are at Georgia just running it downhill?
I think, yeah, it has a lot to do with scheme. It has a lot to do with kind of the point of the game. Like in the NFL, it's methodical. Let's move the ball down the field a little bit. You get a lot of big plays in college football
That's
that you
true.
don't
But,
get in
like,
the
James
NFL.
Cook is like, I mean, he was pretty good at Georgia, and he's
Yeah,
like, for the Bills, he's like, off the charts incredible.
but
Isn't it crazy?
you know what we don't do is what we never factor in as fans
Uh-huh.
is James. And I don't know anything about James Cook. Never met him or anything. I'm just using him because you used him. James Cook was a kid at Georgia.
That's true. That is true.
And there's guys that are, later bloomers that, the NFL does a good job of seeing who those guys are.
Yeah.
And they still have that ceiling. And so, guys are still growing. I don't know, man. I don't think I'm still not fully matured, but I don't think physically fully matured until,
Yeah.
early mid 20s?
Yeah, yeah, more like mid, I think. Yeah, and
Yeah.
I graduated high school really young too, so I started college at 17. I would have loved to have been able to play, be like a 19-year-old senior,
Well, the
you
most
know?
frustrating part of my job is I talk to college coaches all the time, and they'll talk about a 17-year-old kid, and they'll
Mhm.
say, "Yeah, we're gonna recruit him," or "No, man, we don't like him. Like, he don't have the body type we're looking for. He doesn't have," and I'm like, "He's 17.
Right, yeah.
Like, what do you think Andrew Luck look like at 17? You know what I mean? Like, what do you think any of these guys look like? If you go back and look at Saquon Barkley, I saw this yesterday. If you go back and you look at him, like at 17 years old, he looks nothing like he looks now.
He's a
So I
freak.
think
Holy
just
moly.
like everything in life, there's a developmental pattern. And in football, because these guys are put out front so early, we forget that. And we think that these guys are fully grown men. And they're not. They're not. There's still a lot of growing to do for all of these guys just because they're big human beings. Like they're still it doesn't change the fact that they're grown man strength and they're grown man traits and everything. The old school hunter mentality of like you're going to get to this age and then you got to go kill some stuff if we're going to eat, right? That's still a thing. That's still a thing. So it's, I think that has a little bit to do with it. But to answer your question directly, I also think that you in the NFL have a lot less mistakes. And so some guys are just wired to where, okay, I'm fine with taking two, I'm fine with taking four, and then I'll pop one that goes
Mhm.
for 40, right? And they're patient and they understand the concept and the strategy of the game. Where in college, there's a little bit more impatience. Like 4 minute drives are a long time in college, bro.
Right.
In the NFL, a 4 minute drive is like a quick strike. So I just think I think it's much different games, but I do think there's a lot of parallels to that question and what life like is as you're growing up, and I have learned that, especially in dealing with 17, 18, and 19-year-olds. I mean, I got a guy that we're gonna have on this podcast named Brady Hart.
Uh-huh.
He just turned 17, and he's already at Texas A&M. He went to Texas A&M as a 16-year-old,
Okay.
and unbelievable quarterback and the most mature person I've ever been around in my life to the point that I wonder, like, is this kid even real? Like that type of thing, right?
Right.
You have to he's 6'4", 6'5". Like you have to remind yourself that this kid is 16, 17 years old on a college campus and has some money. Like, what would I have done?
Oh, bad. I didn't have money and did bad things, so that's it's
I lasted 30 minutes in college.
So here, I got another question. I got a quarterback question.
Okay.
So apparently, being an NFL quarterback is the hardest thing in the history of the world because the greatest college quarterbacks can't even stay on a roster.
Hmm.
I mean, I I don't know stats about a lot of people, but I know a bunch of Georgia quarterbacks. Aaron Murray was I mean, just one of the he was an incredible college quarterback. At one point, he'd won more college football games than any other quarterback. I think Colt McCoy broke his record, but Colt would be another good example, right?
Mhm.
And Colt's been an eternal backup. And by the way, we'll get him on here. I know him. So, uh, Aaron Murray, dude. I mean, he almost wins a national championship. Everything he does is right. He can't make it. Jake Fromm was like a freshman phenom. He's hanging in there, but he's like what, third string? I mean, he's
Mhm.
barely hanging on the rosters.
Yep.
And then these randos at these mid majors that didn't get recruited. You know what I mean? You're like,
Josh
who is
Allen.
Ben Roethlisberger? Right,
Yeah.
Josh Allen. You're like, whatever. And then they come in and they're like, oh, well, they just happen to be the greatest quarterback you've ever seen.
Yep. I think it's the same thing. I think it's some
It's got
guys
to be
develop.
between the ears, so much of it.
Well, it is, but some guys develop really, really early. When you think about recruiting in college, like we recruit these kids at 14, 15, 16 years old. And so a lot of times you go get the biggest, strongest, fastest kid.
Uh
And
huh.
then they get in college and that all changes. Somebody grows 5, 6 inches and puts on 30 pounds. The main difference, though, in the college and the NFL game from a quarterback perspective is space. Is in college, like your definition of open is that guy's running in front of the other guy.
Yeah.
In the NFL, these guys are so long that you have to be creative and you have to have the vision to see, okay, he's covered, but if I throw it here, I can sneak it in there. And then you have to have the arm strength, the arm talent, and the confidence to actually do that. So it is I don't know how these guys do it. And I tell them this, I work in amazement with these guys every single day. I hopped in a quarterback simulator a couple years ago in Colorado Springs,
Okay.
put it on the NFL level, quickly went 3 for 26 with 7 interceptions.
Because nobody can see, right? I mean, that's something else I
So
think that's
fast.
funny. They're like, well, this guy's only 6'1", but that guy's 6'4". Well, nobody sees over the 7 foot tall lineman, right? Isn't it just a mob of people?
Yeah,
And
and
then
with a wingspan.
I don't understand. How do you see that guy's open on the sideline by one step? Like
It's
he's
it's
just throwing
crazy.
it up there. This guy.
It's
I mean,
crazy. It's anticipation. It's anticipation because if you see it, it's too late.
right,
Like
right,
that
right.
game is so fast that if you see it, it's just way too late. It is crazy. They are truly every one of them, every single one of them. Nate Peterman, is somebody that is local and I love to death. And Nate had an unfortunate half of football.
Right.
Um, and he, people still talk about that, but Nate Peterman is an elite individual in every sense of the word. Like these guys are, if you're a backup in the NFL, you're one of the 64 best at what you do in the world.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It's
Like
I think
it's
that's the sweetest gig on the planet right there is the backup quarterback in the
uh,
NFL.
you give me that practice squad spot, man. What it pays now, I got zero chance of having to get in. Man, let's rock with that. I'm good with that. Can I
It
flip
is
it?
it is amazing though. And you are right about I mean, I think we see it here in Jacksonville with Trevor.
Yeah,
Um, I mean, when he was at Clemson, what maybe once or twice they even competed talent level against a team that could keep up, and everybody he's throwing to is 6 yards
yeah,
away from the next guy.
yep,
And if you're in trouble, just hand it to ETN, who just also happens to be one of the best running backs. And then to and again, man, even and look, I'm a big Jags fan. And as long as everything's going perfect for him, he's great.
yeah, yeah.
But it rarely goes perfect. There's
You want to hear
rarely a
my
clean pocket.
you want to hear my best Trevor story,
Oh,
real
I'd love
quick?
to. And he's a great guy,
Um,
by the way. Love him.
amazing, amazing, amazing. So my best Trevor story, and I'm trying to get to this, so excuse me here for a second. In August of 2017, I tweeted out with the first pick in the 2020 NFL draft, the Jacksonville Jaguars select Trevor Lawrence.
Okay,
So
wow.
if you go to my Twitter at Denny_Thompson, and this is my pinned tweet. So I was sitting at a high school game watching this kid play, and he's just dicing it, Joby. Just
Sure.
I've never seen anything like this kid. And I think it's the first time ever that I've sat there and went, all right, if this kid don't get hurt, like this is a surefire thing. The only reason why I put Jacksonville is because I'm from here, and so I thought it would get some retweets or something. You know what I mean? Like
Well,
that type of thing, and it
and
happened.
odds are we're gonna have a pretty high level pick.
We went to the AFC Championship that year, but yeah,
Oh,
you're
let's
right.
go.
You're right. You're right. You're right. So, but Trevor is a great example because Trevor is, it just he. I'm a huge fan, and it just shows that it takes everything to succeed.
Right.
You know, I don't know. I'm in this point in my life where yes, we're talking about football, but when I say that, I think about like you, and I think about the church, and I think about our business. Like it takes so much to succeed. It
Right.
takes so many people around you. It takes it beyond a village. Like it's not the village concept is okay, whatever. No, you got to have people that are willing to fight for you and are willing to work harder than they've ever worked based off of your leadership. And I think for a lot of guys, and I think Trevor does a good job of this, but I think for a lot of guys, that's scary, man. Like I've got talent, you've got talent. You lead a large organization. Like you have to have those people believe in you so much for you to get to where you want to go that they have to literally put some of their hopes and dreams aside to know that, all right, where Joby's going is where I need to go, and I'm going to help take this church there. And I think that's true in football. I think that's true in everything, man. So it's tough.
One of the things we tell our staff all the time around here at 1122 is we care more about how you're doing than what you're doing. And you can only say it if you actually believe it. And nobody wants to be a role player in the epic adventure of you. And so if you want people to trust you and sacrifice for you, you better give them trust and sacrifice for them.
So well
And
said.
I mean, Jesus, this is a huge part of what he talks about all the time. Like you want to be great, you better be a servant. You want to be first in the kingdom, you better be last. You want to be the boss, you better dress yourself as a servant and wash some feet. And the great leaders really care about people. And then, it's a terrible thing to feel used, isn't it? I mean, I imagine in the arena you work in, that must be one of the hardest things to overcome. Um, there's a statement, I can't even believe I'm going to quote him. I'm glad he retired so I can finally like him. But when Nick Saban was talking about why he left college athletics, because man, I can't stand that guy until now that I can just root for him as a human. He might be one of my favorite commentators.
Mhm.
What a brilliant human being, right? If I ever talk to him and Kirby, those two, the question I have for them are how do you get so much out of these people? Because everybody started with the same level, but you two tend to get more out of these humans than anybody else. Anyway, Saban says the moment college football became transactional instead of transformational, I'm out.
Mm.
I think the problem with a lot of churches is there's a lot of big growing churches and it can become too transactional and not transformational. I think one of the things here at 1122 that we stay highly focused on is that idea of transformation, not just transaction. Now, there is a transaction when you trust Christ for to be your savior, that you are transferred from the kingdom of darkness to the kingdom of light. Your sins are paid for. That is a transaction. But the point of this is not to get people to make a decision. The point of this whole thing is to make disciples, which is about transformation. And I think the coaches that actually love their kids, and it's probably true in the NFL too, as opposed to trying to use them as pawns for their own benefit. These are very two different kind of environments. And so whether you're like the assistant manager at Home Depot or you're the head football coach of the Georgia Bulldogs, if you're using people for your own good, it's not going to go well. It's not going to end well. And I think you see a lot of coaches that have a lot of short-term success, and then when they leave, it's a dumpster fire versus coaches. I mean, I think a big hero in college football is Coach Mark Richt. I mean, I think he's an absolute hero. Could never win the big game, couldn't win a national championship. But again, man, one or two plays go different twice for him, and Georgia's got 4 national championships in the last 15 years. But that man, he cared about players. He cared about young men. He tried to grow young men into grown men. And then when Georgia fires him and Kirby takes over, Kirby's got a whole different breed in the locker room. Maybe not all the 5 stars everybody else has, but there is already a culture there that a coach has built about caring for and growing people, transforming people versus just, I'm trying to use you to get more SEC titles here. I think it matters.
Well, yeah, and I think one of the traits, and I would love to have Kirby on. Um,
Me too.
not not real sure where I stand with him right now. Um,
Oh, yeah, you got insights and all kinds of stuff. I
yeah,
get it.
I no, I mean it's I think from afar, what I think Kirby does so well is that guy just keeps swinging, man. Like there, you know what I mean? It's
We're gonna eat. You're like,
yeah.
I'm scared. I'm just watching. I'm for you, and I'm
Yeah,
nervous.
you sit there and you watch, like, that Alabama game this year, and I'm sitting there, and that is I've been to a lot of cool places for games. Joby, that
Right.
place was insane that day. I don't know what it was, but those fans came to play that day.
Yeah.
And you sit there and you watch a team battle back from maybe one of the worst first halves in a big game that you've ever seen in your life. And I texted Kirby that night. I'm like, man, I've watched you win national championships, but I
Yep.
think more was said about that man as a coach and what those players believe in and are willing to do for that man, in that comeback that fell a little bit short than any game I've ever seen in my life. And it's all the reasons that you just said, man. It's literally all the reasons you just said. I mean, you go in at halftime, and we always talk about halftime speeches, but man, speeches only work if people respect you.
That's right.
You know what I mean? Like if just junk is coming out of your mouth and nobody believes it, nobody's paying attention. But there has to be a point where this team goes, yeah, we want to win for ourselves, but we believe in this Joker. And he just keeps swinging and never gives up on his guys and just goes and goes and goes. That matters. And when you have
Yes.
it, I'll tell Georgia fans this, like, right now, because for them, this year wasn't a success, which is wild, by the way.
Well, yeah. If you've been a Georgia fan long enough and you keep a little bit of perspective, you go, okay, no, we're in the hunt every year. 10 years ago, we would have sold a child to be in the hunt occasionally. I remember a few years ago saying, I wish we could just be like Auburn. Just give me 1 year, like where Cam Newton shows up and they win it, and then we can be like very mediocre again, and I'll be fine. Well, it turns out your appetite is insatiable. So once you win one, you want to win them all, right?
Yeah,
But I mean, now with the 12-team playoff, dude, we're in the hunt every year.
yeah. I mean, my point and what I was going to say is just simply, if I'm a Georgia fan, man, after this year, I think I feel better about my guy leading the charge at Georgia than I ever have.
Oh,
I witnessed it, man. I was at every single game this year, and just that schedule and just
right.
the mental fortitude and the mental toughness that it took for those guys and that coaching staff. I didn't play, Joby, and by the time we got to Ole Miss, bro, I was worn out, and
Yeah.
all I was doing was there watching. So I can't even
Well,
imagine, man.
in Kirby, we
It's
trust. There's no, I mean, what other coach would you want?
no, I'm a fan. I'm
Now
a
that
fan. I've
Saban's
told him
gone,
that.
what other coach would you want for the next however many years to to give it a run? And recruiting's through the roof, and I don't. Yeah, I'm into it, dude. I'm into it. But
Well, I
all
do
right, I
want
got
to.
another. Here's another thing. I got so
Okay,
many
and then I'm gonna
questions.
flip it on you though.
No
See,
problem.
you get one more, and then I got some for you.
I got two more. But they're
All
both
right.
quarterbacks.
All right.
Why did it take so long for Dog Nation to embrace Stetson Bennett? If he was a 5-star recruit, we'd be building a statue of him out front. I think we should
Yep.
still do it. You know what I mean?
Yep.
He's kind of weird to talk to, little guy, freaking amazing, man. If you just look at his stats, if you just look at like what he would do, like that Tennessee game when they rush him and he just takes that thing for 22 yards and races everybody to the corner. And I mean, give me a break, dude. I'm telling you, if that guy was a 5-star, 6-point recruit out of high school, we'd be building statues to him. All right. But it seems like the coaches weren't into him for a while. The media's Herb Street probably helped his case more than anybody, because Kirk would finally be like, can we just say this guy's good? 2
Mhm.
national championships, 4-time MVP in every playoff game he ever played in. So help me understand that.
Uh, I don't know. I think he was a little bit of a victim of a story, a little bit of the walk on story.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that got overplayed so much that I think people thought that this was just kind of a happy go lucky walk on, living his dream life guy. This dude was a dude, man. Like, I mean, elite athlete. We were at the combine Anthony Richardson's year,
Who's
and
the stud?
Stetson was there. And I've seen Stetson a million times, but never in that context of where like they're just measuring raw ability and power and speed.
Right.
Effortless, Joby. Effortless. Like, man goes out there. I don't remember what he ran, but it was like a smooth 4.6 something, like really nice. I'm watching him throw. Like this dude has got a huge engine. So I think for him, it was, the story of, man, he's a walk on and, from Georgia. One thing I have learned about Georgia fans, man, they love them some boys from Georgia now.
Black shear, baby.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Especially if you're a
So
country boy, you know?
I think that Georgia fans like the story more than they actually liked what was actually happening. And so it
Yeah.
just kind of stuck with him. But yeah, man, I mean, he is absolutely phenomenal athlete and probably, I don't know, I don't remember him in high school. So probably maybe it was a late bloomer,
Yeah.
but at some point shouldn't have been looked at any differently than a 4 or 5 star recruit. That's for sure.
Well, he
And by
was
the way,
like an 8-year senior or something crazy. I mean, he was old because of
well,
COVID and transfers and whatever.
well, that's what I was going to say is I remember going on up to Georgia when Carson was a junior or senior in high school and sitting in their quarterback room. Remember Stetson being in there, Jake Fromm being in there. And then all of a sudden they had JT Daniels and who was the Wake Forest kid that came in that everybody
Oh,
said,
he lasted for
uh,
like one series.
he was supposed to be their guy. And
Yeah.
then there was another guy that they started at Arkansas. They just had this room full of transfers and 5 star guys.
Yeah.
Then they had Carson come in, who was, a high recruit. And then they had another 5 star guy. I think Brock Vandergriff came in.
Oh, yeah.
So you look at
Viking.
this room and you've got what 30 stars worth of production, and then you've got Stetson. So I don't know, man. The interesting thing to your point about transaction, I don't know that Stetson Bennett happens right now. With
Oh,
as
yeah.
much money as is being paid to quarterbacks, and maybe at Georgia this does, but now you've got the dynamic of, man, if I bench this guy, I got a booster coming to say, yo, dude, why did we
Yeah.
give him a mil, 2 mil, $3 million? And
That's
if you're
sad.
not, yeah, yeah, I mean, that's,
Carson's a really good story. I mean, listen, man. All right. So he's going to Miami. I'm just going to tell you what I think as a raging dog fan.
yeah,
Good for him.
yeah,
Good for him. The moment and whatever they're reporting, obviously you're not going to say, but they're reporting $10 million. And I know some NFL quarterbacks in their first contract cycle, and he'll be doing way better than them. And bro,
he ain't
as a
making 10 million.
raging
I'll tell
dog
you right now,
fan,
he ain't making $10 million.
I believe you. I know.
Okay.
But and you're saying that's low?
No, that
Oh,
report, and I'm gonna let you finish, but I
okay.
hear this all the time. That report is when you take every contract ever that
Oh,
he's done in college.
okay, I got it.
Miami's not paying him $10 million.
Well,
I
I know,
wish I
but
wish they were.
yeah, me too. But whatever it is, I'm saying good for him because he did wait. He did wait his turn, and he had to, get some things tightened up. And then, I mean, what a phenomenal quarterback. All right, my next quarterback comment is this: when he got hurt,
Ugh.
I know. We shouldn't go for it on fourth and forever anymore with no time. It doesn't go good for us. Everybody gets killed. So, and I'm praying for him that his arms gets better. And praise God that we live in a time with doctors and I mean, look, people, pills, and prayers, man. That's how things get fixed. All right, and so good for him. But when Gunnar Stockton took over, and everybody got really excited, I was like, we're done. We're done. And even my own family, even in the first quarter, they're like, look how good he is. I'm like, they can all run and throw. But I'm telling you, now this is what I don't know about quarterbacks, but you're gonna help me out here. When Carson stood up to the line, he's doing everything. This is my opinion. He's changing coverages. He's like, you block here, da da da. And he hardly ever got hit because he always knew where that outlet was. There was never an unblocked man. He's captaining the whole thing. So I don't care how good you can run and throw. And probably I don't care how many skull sessions you've been in until you get in that stadium to captain the whole thing. If you can't do it from the line, if you can't make all of those shifts with the line and coverage and back, you get over here, right?
Right.
And then
Yep.
you see Gunner couldn't pull it off. And again, I think you can run and throw good.
Mhm.
But if you can't get that part of it, then you just can't unless you're, like when you're playing whatever. When you're playing Tulane, then yeah, you can just run at them and it's fine.
Dang, a little Tulane hate here, man.
But when or whoever, you know,
It's a bowl
whatever.
team right there. Dang.
Well, but it's still whatever. If you're playing NC State, I don't know. All teams I wasn't good enough to play for. Uh,
No,
but am
that's
I wrong? That's
no,
it,
no, no,
right?
no. You're right. You're right. I think there's such a rhythm to it. There's such a
Mhm.
it's such a complexity. At the end of the day, like it's still like you're blocking and tackling. Like
Right,
toughest team usually wins. Period. But if you go up there not knowing what you're seeing,
right.
and these guys are so good, you don't stand a chance. Gunner will get there, but he just
Yeah,
hadn't had reps. Like
that's
I
what I'm
mean,
saying. I
yeah, to
fully
put
believe
him
the
in.
future's bright. You know, especially when you play, you know, you get a couple of those warm up games and you get first team reps for a year and you get to practice against Georgia all off season. That's got
That
to be
part.
helpful.
Yep. Yep.
But
That part right there, man. That
right.
practice against that defense, I Carson and I have talked about this a million times. I mean, you practice against that defense and not just the dudes, but the structure and the complexity of it. It's going to prepare you.
I
It's
love it.
definitely going to prepare you. So I mean, it's interesting, man, and I can't wait to have him on because I think there's a couple guys we work with that and I've known Carson a long time. That's like a kid to me. That's like I mean
Yeah.
he means the world to me. But like Caleb Williams, guys
Mhm.
like that. Like I mean, these guys are so misunderstood. They're so misunderstood, and so I can't wait to get guys like Carson on so that people can just hear, um, you know what they're actually like. What's actually going on because I think people will be surprised. That's why I'm so excited about this podcast, man.
Well, one of the things I'm excited about is um, we are not going to be a bunch of gotcha guys because everybody's trying to get that like viral moment or you know zinging somebody. That is not what I just want to like root guys on. Ask the question. I mean, I've got 10,000 questions. Like when we talk to Kirk Herbstreit, man, I want to talk to him about his dogs. I want to talk to him about
Yeah,
his family. I want
absolutely.
to talk to him about how are you. You've got to love Ohio State like crazy, but when you call the games, you really call it down the middle. How in the world do you pull that off? I couldn't do that. I'd
Mhm.
be like, "What is that ref doing?" I could be the worst.
Bro, I would pay to hear you call a Georgia game.
Oh my god, let's go. I could do it for the hometown, 960 the ref. I could do it for them.
Maybe we'll do like a stream of the podcast during a Georgia game and let you call that bad boy.
Dude, you know how bad I'll be. It is so bad. Like we go to the Georgia Florida game every year, and we go with a dear friend of mine, Bo Bozard. Owns here's a commercial, Bozard Ford in St.
Yep.
Augustine. But he's got a box, but it's in the Florida section, But I go with him every year, and like this year, man, when we're losing at first, it ain't good. I am not having fun. I don't know that my mouth would work, and I preach for a living. I mean, I every play would be like, "What are we doing?" Can we seal the edge? That's when we get Kirby on here. That's my question. What happened these last 2 years? We can't seal the edge. Like, what are we doing? I think we overestimate our abilities. And I know you teach linebackers to play it inside out. I get it, but sometimes you got to just set the edge and let them turn it back to the other 10 guys. Help me understand this, football
Are
people.
are you aware how angry you make people when you talk about Georgia
Yeah,
at
I
11:22?
totally do. Yeah, I do.
My dad, it drives him insane. And there's not a bigger fan of Joby Martin on this planet than Dennis Thompson Sr. But he will come up to me after a service. I don't know why Joby's got to talk about them Bulldogs. I ain't here to hear about them Bulldogs.
Well, I tell him, man, my Bible's written in red and black, so I don't know what to tell you. Let's
It's
go.
fantastic, man. Hey, real quick, and then we'll wrap up this first one, man. I do have a couple of things for you because
Okay.
I do want people to understand as we're going through this, your life has to be crazy because we talked about having this calling to preach, and then you start this church in a Walmart in 2012.
Yep.
2012.
September 23rd of 2012. Yep.
Which is, I think we started going shortly thereafter. You came and
Yep.
spoke to a team I coached at Providence back in like 2011 or something like that, right?
Yep. Let's
I
go.
remember thinking, well, this dude's a little different. I kind of like this guy. And then when you opened that church right there, when you guys planted that church, we started to go. And so you're sitting in this Walmart, and then, you hit the big time and you take over the Hobby Lobby
Yeah.
next door as well, build that. But what is it like for you now that you're flying all over the world speaking and you've got 3 very successful books, right? Like there seems to be, and I get a little bit of this. There seems to be like this. Do you feel like oh man, like if I don't keep going at this, if I don't see what else is out there, if I don't push, if I live in fear, that I'm not honoring what God has called me to do? When I think a lot of people in your situation would just be thrilled to sit at home and preach to the numbers that you preach to. Does that make any sense? Can you talk
It
about just
does.
what drives you to continue to go and go and go and go and create new and bigger things?
Well, first of all, there's a couple of things. It's never been about the numbers for me whatsoever. It just the personal, like me being able to pray for you and your wife in a time of need is infinitely more important than standing on a stage in front of however many people and the people online and all that. I don't think about it that way. It's very personal for me. I got in this to just make disciples, and God has grown it way bigger. The travel around stuff, I've just in conversations with some older pastors whose shoulders that I stand on, they just encouraged me years ago to tithe my time to the kingdom. So all I want to do is be the pastor of the Church of 1122 until I'm dead. At some point, I'll hand over the lead pastor role when it's time, but I want to stick around. I want to be like Vince Dooley in Georgia. He was a coach, he played his time, and then he became the AD, and he just kept serving Georgia. I want to do that for our church. I just love these people. I love this church. That's all I want to do. I give two craps about being Christian famous. I don't, it's actually a pain in the butt. But I do need to tithe my time to the kingdom. And for me, and I'm glad you mentioned fear, there's a parable that haunts me in Matthew chapter 25. It's called the parable of the talents. And I won't preach, but the short of it is Jesus says the kingdom of God is like a master who left town for a while and he entrusted to his servants 1 talent, 2 talents, and 5 talents. And a talent was a measure of money, it was 20 years' wages. It's about $1 million, $2 million, and $5 million. The $1 million guy, the 1 talent guy, because he was afraid, hid what the master had given him. And when the master returned, he called him wicked and slothful and sent him to hell. The 5 talent guy and the 2 talent guy were faithful. They weren't led by fear. And they did what the master would have him do with what he had given them. And they both get the exact same reward. And the master says, "Well done, good and faithful servant." As I evaluate my life, I don't know if I'm a 2 talent guy or a 5 talent guy, but I refuse to be a 1 talent guy. I just refuse to be led by fear. And based on the number of people that have gotten saved here and that we baptize and the growth of our church, our church is probably in that 5 talent category. And I just want to be a really good steward of what the Lord has given me. That's it, man. So take this opportunity. Dude, if I didn't like you, there's no chance I would do this. If I didn't believe in you, if I hadn't seen what God has done in you and have 100 conversations, there's no chance I'm doing this. I'm not just trying to do podcasts. Even if I were guaranteed that this podcast was going to be, big and all that. That's not what drives me at all. I want to hear, "Well done, good and faithful servant." And I think this is really important. The master doesn't say, "Well done, good and fruitful servant." The fruit is up to him. I'm just supposed to be faithful to do what he tells me to do. And so I just got to stay in my lane, play my position, preach the Bible, lead our church, cast and fund the vision. That's what I do. I've never once promoted me. Like, there's no press kit. It's so funny when I get invited to speak these conferences. They're like, "Can you send us headshots?" And I was like, "Do you have Instagram?" Just you're gonna have to. I don't do that. That's not my
Yeah.
world. I don't do any of that stuff. I just try to keep my head down, do what I'm supposed to do, and if the Lord wants me to do more, He'll give me an opportunity. And if not, no problem. I'd be happy to just pastor our church. Now, if you truly make disciples, disciples make disciples. And the reason our church has grown, it ain't because of me. The reason our church has grown is because we've taught our church that every single one of us have at least one more person in our life that we should be praying, "God, how would you use me to reach my one more?" and we're real serious about that. And I know you're real serious about that.
Dude,
And so that's it. And
that's so interesting.
here's what I need you to. When I was in college, bro, I did not have a church that I felt like partnered with me to reach my fraternity brothers. So I'm leading this little Bible study in my fraternity house. One of my fraternity brothers gets saved. I'm like, where the heck am I going to take them? I can't take them to my church because they don't have pleated khakis and they don't know the doxology. They won't fit in. Like, and so when we started this church, I want to partner with you so that all your quarterback, everybody you know, all your friends, that you know that if you bring them here, these people are going to hear the truth and be loved. That's it. And then God will do what he does.
Man, that's so interesting. And I'm a note taker, so if you see me sit like writing
Great.
stuff down, the tithe my time to the kingdom, I've never heard that before. And man, when you just listen to what that means, when we talk about tithe, and when you just listen to tithing your time,
Right.
man, that'll kind of hit you. I don't
Yeah, it was
tithe my
actually,
time. I don't.
I got like reprimanded. It was Rick Warren, okay? So big old famous pastor, Saddleback Church, wrote Purpose Driven Life, best-selling book of all time, second only to the Bible. And this is probably 10 years ago. So I'm 51 now. And I'm in this little meeting with him and some other people. And it's like the guys in their 60s training up the guys in their 40s. That's what this was. It's pretty neat. And he asked me about like speaking conferences and all that. And I was like, I don't know if I'll do that. And he goes, what? How did you learn what you learned? And I was like, well, I read your books and I went to your conferences. And he goes, so if you don't do it, because now it's your turn. If you don't do it, then how's the next generation going to learn? And he's that's what he said. He's like, you owe it. Like I did it for you. Now you need to do it for the next guys. So, and then he just said, tithe your time. It's about 5.5 weeks of your, there's 52 weeks in a year. So about 5.5 weeks of your year, carve out for just kingdom endeavors. And so that's what I do, man. So I'll speak youth FCA camps or mission trips, or these are non-1122 things. A lot of men's conferences right now. I'm actually about to go. There's this, I forget what it's called. I should probably know the name of it, but it's like a retreat for NFL players.
Mhm.
And, I'm going to go just make disciples wherever. And I never call them and say, you know what, you really ought to invite me. But if I get invited, when I get invited, I have a team of people, including my elders, that help me determine what the faithful stewardship of my gifts, talent, and time are, not just to our church, but to the kingdom. So
Man, that's so
that's what I
good,
do.
Joby. That's so good because for me, I'm not talking about other people. When I talk about this, man, I plan on being as much of an open book as I plan on being. Right?
Good.
Like there's
Yeah.
some things that just,
Sure.
but when I hear that, man, that does something to me because I don't do that. I don't. I mean, I don't think about it. I think about like, all right, my time is like I'm going to show up to church on Thursday night. You know
Okay.
what I mean? Like my
Yeah.
time is like, oh yeah, I went to saturated, so I'm good for I'm good for a little while.
Yeah, but you got to let yourself off the mat just a little bit here, Denny.
No, 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 no. What
No,
I
all
mean.
what I'm saying is this. Let me reframe one thing.
Okay.
Of all the things you get invited to do, I mean, like literally at the combine, doesn't almost every NFL team ask you to come in and give your opinion on quarterbacks and all of that? That's a true statement, isn't it?
It's probably a slight exaggeration, but yeah, a lot. Yeah,
Okay.
not almost
Well,
all, but yeah,
all right. Well,
a
zero have
few.
asked me my opinion
Right,
about who
right,
we should
right,
draft.
right.
So
Yeah.
there you go. And yet, of all the things that you could do with your time, you wanted to start a podcast with your preacher
Mhm.
so that Jesus and the gospel and the Bible and the love of God would have to be a consistent part of the conversation. That's a thing, man. Okay?
Yeah.
In my opinion, that is you're a five talent guy in regards to influence in college and NFL football. You are. And you're trying to leverage that for the kingdom in a way that makes sense for the way you've been wired. Because you know how to talk on a microphone for hours and hours and hours about life and football. I've listened to so many hours of you on your local radio show here. Okay.
Mhm.
That's what I'm talking about. When I say tithe your time, that doesn't necessarily, that it isn't always just the soup kitchen or teaching Sunday school. I
I
think it's a
want to
better
take that.
idea
I,
to like, how did God wire me and my and my experience and my desires and my hurts and who I am, and in a unique way say, Lord, I want to reflect you. So,
I wanna
you know,
take that compliment, and I'm gonna take that compliment,
good,
and I thank you for that. I also struggle because I know, man, I'm doing this so that I hopefully am pushed to do what you just said.
good,
And that was my struggle with this, man, and we'll wrap up after this, but, when I approached you about doing this, I don't know why. I don't know when. I don't know how. Like we'll get into more and more of this as we go, but all of a sudden this was just a thing in my head and I couldn't shake it. And it was like, okay, all right, I'm gonna call Joby. There's no way Joby's gonna do it. Like, there's no chance Joby's gonna do it. And then I call you and you're like, oh man, sounds great. And I'm like, crap. Okay. And so then we meet, and then I go dark for months during football season. And then it just starts. And I think I even text you like, bro, like God's screaming at me on this.
there you go.
And it just was eating and eating and eating. So then I challenged him again. Like it was, and I was like, okay, I'm going to call these guys that I think I can get as guests. And I'm going to ask them to come on this podcast that at this point don't even have a name or a logo or a follower or anything. And they're going to say no. And then I'm going to call Joby and I'm going to be like, my bad, dude. Like I just didn't happen. I called them and they were like, absolutely. Like what date works and all that kind of stuff. And then again, I'm like, dang. Then I took the next step and called your assistant and said, I need a date because if I don't get a date, this is never going to happen.
Right.
And man, when I tell you that I was struggling with this as late as last night at 2 o'clock in the morning or this morning at 2 o'clock in the morning, Joby, I'm not kidding you. Like this is for me. And so I want to take the compliment, but at the same time, like, I don't know what the heck I'm doing here, bro. And I don't know what's going to come out of this. And I don't come out know what's going to, I know I need this. Right, and hopefully other people get something out of it, and I hope we learn some crap and, stuff like that, but I need this more than anybody else needs this because I need to be held I need to hold myself accountable, and I know, as scary as it is, that if I'm gonna hop on a podcast weekly with you, and I'm gonna talk about this stuff, I better move a certain way, and unfortunately for me, like, that's what it takes, man. Like I said, I am a gold medal sinner. Like, Michael
Me,
Phelps of sinning is right here in front of you, man.
yeah, me too. I'm the worst sinner I know because
We
I,
should
I
we should
don't.
have a send off one day.
Yeah, but I only see your sins on Instagram. I know everyone I've ever thought and felt. So I get it, man. I
Same.
I feel completely uh unqualified to get to stand up in front of all the people every week and open the Bible and presume to say this is how you ought to live your life. I mean, I can be so judgmental, I can be so prideful, I get it. So God has, you know, the the accountability of leadership has been one of the greatest catalysts to my own walk with Christ because I know I need him to do what he's asked me to do. I can't do it without him. So I think you're perfectly positioned to do this. And I'm honored to do it with you, man.
Well, I appreciate it, and I'm looking forward to it. I would love to be able to put forth some grand plan to everybody listening right now. All 8 of you right now, probably. No,
Yeah.
but I don't. I don't have it. I don't have it. We're gonna have. I mean, I'll say I think Kirk Herbstreit will be probably our next guest, and we've got some guys that are reaching out and that love to do this type of stuff. And I'm leaning heavily on you and them. And I'm just going to sit here and as much as I can, I'm going to listen. I'm going to learn, and I hope that everybody's able to do that with me. And I am very grateful to you, man, for being patient and doing this. And I sincerely mean that. And that this is the only time I'm going to tell you that, but I mean it. I mean it.
No problem.
Yeah.
But I'm proud of you, dude.
Well, I appreciate it, dude. You wanna wrap us up here?
Here's what I will say. There's some folks listening to this. What's probably going to happen is guys are going to hear this in like 3 months, after they get lured in by some of the guests that come on and all of that, and they're going to back it all the way up to the first one and be like, what is this all about? And what I would say to you is that there's somebody in their truck right now going to work or going to ball practice or whatever. And just like you sitting in saturated and God placed in your heart this idea to do this podcast to leverage your influence for the kingdom, there's a bunch of folks out there right now and you have been given a talent by God, and because of fear, you went and hid that thing. And before he returns, this is your chance to go dig that thing up and go give it a shot. Go give it a try. I mean, whatever it is, ask her out, pop the question, start the business, leave the dead end job. Try the thing that you think God has actually planted in you that you can't explain, but you think it's from him. Because, man, I'm telling you, one day looking back, you would much rather swing for the fences than strike out than just be there with a bat on your shoulder and wonder, what if? What if for a grown man is a miserable place to be? It's a much better place to be to go for it. And then at least you know. At least you know if the Lord was in it or not. So that'd be my encouragement. Go for it.
Perfect. Perfect, man. Perfect. Well, we will reconvene shortly with a better guest than myself. And yeah, I mean, the plan is to do as many of these, knock as many of these out as we can. We're both busy people, and we're interviewing busy people. But yeah, I just everybody be patient with us. But man, I'm excited, Joby. I appreciate the time, and we'll reconvene soon, and end this thing the way you end everything. What is it? Be free.
That's it, man. Love you like crazy. Be free.